Arcanum Theurgy episode 8. This is on planets, and I am Dan Rasanowski.
And I am Joe Schaefer.
And we're going to talk about the planets this time, both the alchemical and occult meanings of both. I'm sure they're going to overlap, as this stuff normally does, but I'm going to pass it over to Joe, and he's going to kick us off here.
Okay, thanks, Dan. So first, in order to understand the symbolism of the planets in a hermetic alchemical sense, we need to go over some preliminary information regarding numbers 4 and 3, 4 plus 3, which is, of course, 7. So as the Emerald Tablet tells us, as above, so below, Evola also notes in the Hermetic tradition that everything that exists in the macrocosmos, man also possesses, man being the microcosmos. Evola tells us that sulfur, mercury, and salt are found in the trimundial universe, as well as in man, in whom these three, quote, worlds are manifested as soul, spirit, and body. As a side note here, Evola also notes that soul and spirit do not possess the same meaning in the sense that they do in our time, something we've touched on in previous episodes. Soul and spirit, what do they mean? But moving on, so we have here a trinity, or the Ternary Correspondences in man. Evola provides a quote from Bernard of Treviso, quote, there's Trinity in unity and a unity in Trinity, and there we find body, spirit, and soul, unquote. From the ternary in man, we move to the 4, or quaternary, I'm not sure what the exact pronunciation is, anyways, in man. Here represented by the elements earth, water, air, and fire. Listen to our pretty decent episode on the cross and its relation to the 4 elements for more information on the elements themselves. Evola writes, quote, in man, before everything else, there is a terrestrial being, also called a Saturnian being, or simply Saturn, unquote. He continues, quote, in the second place, we have an aquatic fluid or lunar entity, that is Mercury, or Mercury in a limited sense, and Moon, unquote. Then we have the Mercury united with the fire element, and represented also by the Mercury ideogram with an Aries symbol on top instead of a moon, as we described in our Mercury episode. Finally, there is, quote, the intellectual entity, which is the sun and golden man, unquote. Confusing, as now we are speaking of entities in man that correspond to 4 elements, and also metals, and also planets, and also ancient mythological gods. But we'll keep moving on. So Evola writes, quote, such are the 4 in man, and such are the seats wherein knowledge of the hermetic elements can take place. They have different forms, but they are present and active in man simultaneously, the first in a spatial way, the other 3 in a non-spatial way, like different states of the body in the ordinary sense, and of physical matter, unquote. So, 3, the ternary, added to 4, the quaternary, is 7. So in the following chapter in his book, The Hermetic Tradition, Evola begins, quote, the same metaphysical correspondences apply to another teaching that Hermeticism also shares with the most ancient traditions, that of the 7, which prevails in the symbolism of the 7 planets, unquote. He continues, saying, quote, according to the established meaning of these numeric symbols, 7 is the manifestation of the creative principles, the triad, in relation to the world made up of the 4 elements, 3 plus 4. The full expression of nature creating nature, natura naturans in action, unquote. Evola points out some other symbols we see in 7, such as a 7-fold serpent, 7 heavens, and 7 gateways, but we're just going to focus on the 7 planets. So what are the planets, hermetically speaking? Well, the anonymous author of Meditations on the Tarot writes, quote, Greek astrologers of the 4th century BC, continuing the Babylonian tradition where gold corresponds to the sun and to the god Enlil, and silver to the moon and the god Anu, accepted the following correspondences: gold, sun, silver, moon, lead, Saturn, tin, Jupiter, iron, Mars, copper, Venus, and Mercury, unquote. He also writes, quote, on the subject of the universality of these analogous correspondences between planets and metals, I might add that the 44 years... Hang on, it's got to close something on annoying computers. He also writes that in the 44 years of my studies and experience in this domain, have not led me to modify anything in the table given correspondences, and that, on the contrary, they have supplied numerous proofs, direct and indirect, which have confirmed their truth. So, unquote, basically just saying this pretty much holds up throughout all of his studies, and I haven't seen a different one. There are different rankings of them that you'll come across, which I'll mention in a minute, but basically the correspondences I just listed in his first quote hold up throughout like all of Hermeticism, you know?
Okay, so...
yeah,
Okay.
So...
All right.
Now we've already done an episode on the Sun and Moon and another on Mercury, so feel free to go back and listen to those. Of the remaining 4 that we haven't talked much about yet that I just mentioned, Oswald Wirth breaks them up into pairs. One pair of Jupiter and Saturn and another pair of Mars and Venus. I'm just going to give an extensive compare and contrast of the correspondences of these pairs. So for Mars and Venus, whereas Mars represents iron, Venus is copper, Mars is ability, Venus is sensibility, and I'm just going to say one after the next. So iron, copper, ability, sensibility, anger, gentleness, impatience, patience, vivacity, calm, active energy, apathy, laziness, will, docility, domination, seduction, projection, attraction, brutality, grace, ferocity, tenderness, destruction, conservation, an animal or vital fire, an animal or fluid water, sulfurous ardor, and radical humidity. The sign of Venus, as Wirth tells us, used to be simply a circle with a vertical line coming from the bottom of it, similar to the sign of the feminine found in Asia that almost looks like an upside-down exclamation point where the dot and line connect. But the horizontal line that creates the cross below the circle in the ideogram is added to indicate the arms. So yeah, the Venus is just a circle above a cross. Thus, it is somewhat related to the Ankh or in Egypt. The sign for Mars used to depict a round buckle placed over a javelin, but now, over time, the bottom half of this javelin has since disappeared, leaving us with just the circle and the pointed tip of the javelin jutting off at an angle. So now moving on to the other pair of Jupiter and Saturn. Again, I'm just going to say one after the next. The first will always be Jupiter, the second will always be Saturn. So we have tin, lead, cross is inferior to the crescent moon, cross is dominating the crescent moon. Work of transformation in power, the transforming work performed. Change provoked passively by action on the placid vitality, represented by the horizontal line of the cross. Change provoked actively by action on the acting vitality, represented by the vertical line of the cross. Growth, disintegration, development, arrest, decline, incarnation, disincarnation, generation of material life, decrepitude, animation, transformation, youth, presumption, maturity, experience, life, death. The ideograms of Saturn and Jupiter are combinations of the crescent moon and the cross. Jupiter kind of almost looking like a fancy number 4, and
with a 2 flying off, towards the front
and
of it.
Saturn kind of looking like a fancy lowercase h with like a cross in it. But you'll see them in the picture if you're looking at this on YouTube. I lost my place. So the ideograms of Saturn and Jupiter are combinations of the crescent moon and the cross. For Jupiter, we have the crescent attached to it in a way to the horizontal part of the cross, whereas for Saturn, it is attached to the vertical. Evola cites a few different people, from Della Riviera to Pernetti to Philalethes to Stephanos, who give, like I mentioned earlier, varying hierarchies of the planets. But Saturn or lead is always at the bottom. And one moves through the hierarchy as they move through the work. Evola provides a diagram of a spiral in which one proceeds starting from a higher masculine god or planet or metal, then descends to join the symmetrical or feminine divinity or planet or metal, then rises again and eventually moves to the center, which is the sun or gold. That will make sense when I'll have this provided as a picture in the YouTube video.
So there's always an order. You can't just... if you're going to write it out, there's a specific order that these are always in. It's never just, you can't just do Mars, Mercury, whatever.
Well, like I said, there's varying hierarchies. I don't know which is true, but basically you always start at the bottom with Saturn because it's lead, and it goes with like the Negredo phase of the work. It just represents, material to be worked. and be purified.
Well, of course, the lead.
But then, yeah, I don't know. I mean, like you'll look at the picture for that I'll have, and you can just kind of see what comes next. But
I was just saying because it seems like with you look at these little illustrations, and there always seems to be a specific order that they're always in, even when they're written out. So I don't know. I just assume that there was always an order that they're meant to be in.
okay,
Yeah, I don't know.
well, I mean that wraps it up for my end. So
All right. Well,
you can take it away.
yeah. So you went over a lot of stuff that I did see, but I figured that you would, because I noticed that there was like alchemical stuff when I was looking all this stuff up, and I'm sure Joe's going to touch on it. So I just stuck with the, you're thinking of like your sign, tarot cards come up, your astrology signs come up, numbers do come up, which I do have, as well as symbolic attributes. So there are 7 sacred planets, as we said. Earth is not one of them, and as a matter of fact, the 7 are, let's see, we have Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, and what is it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I do believe Neptune and Uranus are in there as well. There are 2 hidden planets, which are the Sun and Moon. And of course, those aren't planets. So what do I mean by that? Well, the ancient astrologers, sages, alchemists, and esoteric practitioners, they recognized like the sway and the power that these had on people. So for symbolic interpretational purposes, they consider them planets.
Well, and I think they in the earliest sense, like they were a planet, because planet just meant wanderer. So these were the things that weren't fixed.
It was a celestial body that moved.
Yeah, exactly. So Sun and Moon were planets in that sense, but now with Neil deGrasse Tyson and NASA,
right.
Pluto ain't no planet. So
well, that's why I got to clarify, because people be like, well, you know what? And it's like, no, no, they're not, but. In this context, yes, they are.
Yeah.
Yeah, so...
You can't do that. You can't, apply what words mean to us right now to what they're talking about. Because you're going way back with this stuff. So.
Exactly. So, these are the connections between the mundane and the cosmic, these planets. And then the non-sacred planets, there are Mars, Earth, Pluto, the Sun, and the Moon. So, Earth is not a sacred planet. So, that is pretty much, a good base. What are the sacred planets? What aren't? Why the Sun and Moon is considered, hidden planets in general. And the Sun and Moon they're luminaries, is what they were described as. So that being said, there are 10 planets in total. Not, overall, but these are the ones that come up. There are Sun, Moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. And each one has a sign associated with it, as well as a tarot card, a number, and then, as I said before, a symbolic attribute. And I'm just going to go through all of them. It might take a minute, but I thought it was very interesting. So we have, and I like kind of what you did, I'm just going to say the name of the celestial body, and then from there on, everything associated with it, and so on and so forth. So the Sun was the Leo. The tarot card associated with it was Sun, of course, and strength. And then the number was 1, and then the attributes were action, vibrance, and vitality. And then from here on out, it basically goes the number associated with the next one. It's always like 1, 2, 3, 4, but I'll just say it for the sake of reading this. Moon was Cancer, Moon, as the tarot card, and Priestess, of course. The number was 2, and then the symbolic attribute was mystery, emotion, and intuition. Mercury was Gemini and Virgo. Magician was the tarot card, 4, the number, and then the attributes intellect, communication, and understanding. Venus, Libra and Taurus, the Empress and Lovers. 6, because Earth is not a it's not on the astrological list there, so it skips 5. So you go from 4 to 6. 6 is the number. Attributes are beauty, harmony, and attractions. Mars was Aries, and that is the Tower tarot card associated with it. Number is 3. Energy, vigor, and initiative are the attributes. Jupiter, Sagittarius, the wheel, or just wheel. I don't know if it's the wheel. 5, I do believe, is all the way down there. Belief, travel, and expansion. Saturn is Capricorn. World, number is 7. Attributes are control, deep study, and fixation. Uranus is Aquarius. Card is Fool. Number is 8. Attributes are change, invention, and revolution. Neptune is Pisces. Card is Hanged Man. Number is 9. Attributes are intuition, dreams, collective unconsciousness, or unconscience. And the last one, Pluto, Scorpio. I wrote Scorpion on accident because, yeah. So Scorpio, card is Judgment. Number is 0. And attributes are rebirth, transformation, and hidden power. And, of course, you are born under, one of these signs. Everyone is. And basically, what this means is that when you're born under one of these signs, you have a card associated with you, a number, and then you have these attributes attached to you as well as the symbol of each planet, which I found interesting. I guess that's kind of where the whole astrology thing comes from.
Now, since you're talking about symbols now, I don't know if this will mess you up, but I was just going to say, so me talking about like the hermetic alchemical and then you talking just about like occultism, are the actual ideograms the same? Did we know? We talked about this a little earlier, right? I think
we did. So
I just glanced at your
you
notes.
Can just take a look at these really quick. I think a lot of them are very similar. Sun is definitely that's the same across the entire board.
Yeah, I think they like, except for the new ones that you're adding in for your occult side. All the planets I mentioned, they look like they have the same ideogram in both realms of alchemy and occultism. So
yeah, they definitely overlap. So
that's good.
Yeah, it doesn't get confusing. Where again, there's one has one, and goes it webs out in a bunch of different things. So they have their own symbols. We were just talking about that, and you kind of describe them all. And for me to try and describe them, it's going to be nuts.
Rough. There's a picture.
There will be a picture. Yeah. Some of them you do know are Mercury. We've talked about Mercury before. Mars is the symbol for male.
Yeah, Mars and Venus everyone's just familiar with in general.
You talked about, exactly.
The tricky ones are Jupiter and Saturn.
I was gonna say you talked about Saturn. You've talked about Jupiter a little bit. Sun and Moon. Sun is of course always the circle with a dot in it. Moon is just imagine just a picture of a crescent moon.
Yeah. We did a whole episode on that. That was episode 2, I think.
So that's that. There will be a picture as the thumbnail, so you don't have to listen to me try and
do your Googles.
Yeah. Oh, wow. So, and then I have a drawing right here, and of course, so imagine the Star of David. It's in the shape of the Star of David. 6-point star.
It's 2 triangles laid over, superimposed.
Exactly, but it doesn't look like the Star of David. When you look at the actual image, they're overlapping on some points, and then under.
So it's interlocking.
Exactly, interlocking. Yeah. So I would have sat there forever drawing it. So I just and then each point on this star has a planet associated with it. So it is a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So 6-sided star, and each side is a planet. So at the very top, well, actually, let me start. In the middle is always the sun.
Okay.
And at the top,
as I say, do it like a clock just to make it easy.
Yeah, no, I'm not going to go
sometimes describing these pictures of things gets like crazy. It just makes no sense.
So, but it'll be easy. So, 6-pointed star. Imagine the Star of David. Right in the middle, the sun, the symbol for sun. Okay. Then we go to the very top.
So noon.
Noon, and then we're going to go clockwise. Noon is Saturn, and then next one is Jupiter. And then we have, I do believe...
Venus?
That is Venus, yes. For some reason, I don't have Venus, the symbol drawn for Venus in here. I don't know how I missed that, but you're right, that is Venus. Next, we have the Moon, then we have Mercury, and then we have Mars. And then that's just kind of like, that's the 7 sacred, so on and so forth. But each point also has a, I guess you could say... I don't know how to describe it. Like, it has almost a symbolic attribute to it as well. So going from, how I just did it from the top clockwise, we have at the top with Saturn, we have spiritual, will, and purpose. Next one on Jupiter, we have emotional. So you can kind of see that.
Yeah.
And then the next one, I do believe that was Venus. I don't know what happened to Venus again. We have universal love. The bottom, which is the moon, physical body. Next, which is Mercury, higher mind. And then at the very end, we have Mars, which is rational mind. And, and there's also some other ones. Each one also has, there's 12 sacred planets when you look this up, but for some reason they repeat, and I wasn't too sure why they were. Do you know why?
I don't know why, but in the Hermetic tradition, Evola talks about you name the 7 planets, but sometimes they'll be depicted doubled. And I think what that can kind of be, at least from my point of view, like in what I study with this stuff, would be kind of representing, first of all, just the duality. I mean, everything. We had sun and moon, male, female, Jupiter, Saturn, Mars, Venus. There's all those dualities there. And then also kind of like above, below, as below, macrocosm, microcosm, what is out is within, all that type of stuff.
Okay,
so that plays into it.
Because, looking it up and stuff, I saw that, there's this, a circular chart, and it showed it, and it repeated, and I wasn't too sure why, but that makes sense now. Yeah, that's pretty much it. I got one more, but that's just the celestial bodies, their symbols, everything associated with them, a couple drawings, of course. The last one that I found, though, was Chiron, and Chiron has a symbol as well. It almost looks like a little key. Looks like a little key.
Here we go.
Yeah, I know. Everyone ready? It's a circle with a line going from the top of the circle up, and then imagine a K with a circle on the bottom of it.
Yeah.
And that is Chiron. And what Chiron is, technically it's a mythological centaur who was a healer, astrologer, and oracle, but it's the name of a comet. So another celestial body. And what that really does is it just kind of ties everything together because it represents our deep wounds and essentially how we can heal them. It promotes healing in that sense. That's really it.
You want to just spell Chiron so that if an interested listener wanted to Google it to see the symbol that looks like a little key.
Absolutely.
It looks like a KO.
Yeah. It is Chiron.
Cool.
And then, so it's another celestial body that has things attached to it, but I can go into that more. We're just talking about the planets, so for me to wedge in another thing is just a whole nother story. But represents our wounds, that we are supposed to heal them, how we can heal them, as well as teaching others, because that's kind of who he was within the Greek mythology. So, with that being said, that is everything to start with the 7 sacred planets, as well as the few that are not sacred. I'm sure we will touch upon these again, but this is just a very broad and basic.
Yeah.
Because there's so much to this. This is a good starting point. So, did you have anything to add before we?
No, I guess before you sign off, I was just thinking in this last minute or so. What do you think about we should do next? Maybe colors.
Yeah,
you'd be down for that.
Yeah, I think that was
because then I'll do like for alchemy. So that will entail for me talking about colors, the symbolism, and you can't. Then you're going to be. I'm also going to end up having to describe like the phases of the work, which will just be that's fine. That's good. You know what I mean? So
yeah.
And then you could just look up like colors. I'm sorry, I almost coughed. Colors and what they're kind of corresponded with. I don't know if you've come across anything like that yet.
A little bit, and I think this is where it might diverge like pretty drastically.
I would imagine so. Yeah.
So
except maybe like black.
Yeah.
Which again, like Saturn, though, like because that's like kind of where they come together. But there will be some overlapping, but some diverging too.
So that'll definitely be interesting. So I guess next episode 9, will be on colors. With that being said, this was episode 8 on the planets, the sacred planets. I am Dan Rasanowski.
Joseph Schaefer.
And thanks for listening. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next week.